This is the Music History In-Depth podcast for November the 27th through December 3rd. On this week's show, Adele is influenced by an ex-boyfriend and a bus driver, a spitting incident inspires an album, and John Lennon pays off a bet. In 2008, Adele released her first album, 19. The album did okay at first. Then she was booked to be the musical guest during the now famous Sarah Palin episode of Saturday Night Live. After that, 19 took off, as did Adele's career. She ended up selling millions of records and won 2 Grammy Awards, including Best New Artist. During the tour in America to support the album, 2 things happened that would transform her into a superstar, though she wouldn't know it at the time. The first was that her tour bus driver played a lot of contemporary country music while driving. Adele was fascinated by the music since she hadn't grown up with it in England. The other was that she had a boyfriend at the time who was, let's just say, a little bit of a jerk. She loved him so much that she stupidly canceled the rest of her tour so that she could be with him. She blames it on her drinking back in the day. By the time it came time to record her sophomore album, 21, Adele's relationship had ended pretty badly. What's a singer to do, of course, but to write about it Taylor Swift style. Adele met producer Paul Epworth at East Coast Studios in London, England, to get to work on the song. She couldn't get all of that country and blues music she heard from that tour bus driver from the year earlier out of her head. She also couldn't get her nasty ex out of her mind. Her and Paul wrote a song about the relationship in a single afternoon. As she tells it, it was her reaction to being told that she was worthless and weak. The song combined country, blues, and roots country into one mix with some pretty powerful lyrics. Some of the production techniques were pretty unorthodox as well. In fact, for that famous foot-stomping beat in the middle of the song, Adele stomped her foot on an old wood floor in the studio and they recorded it. The album 21 was released on January 24th, 2011. That first single from that album was released on November 29th, 2010. The song and the album became worldwide smashes. It became Adele's first #1 single on the Billboard Singles Chart and stayed #1 for 7 straight weeks. Adele again received multiple Grammy Awards, including winning Record and Song of the Year, and broke sales records worldwide. The song itself has sold over 8.7 million copies and is one of the biggest selling songs of the 2010s, which should make a certain tour bus driver very happy and a certain ex-boyfriend very, very unhappy. The lead single from the album 21, Rolling in the Deep, released on November 29th, 2010. This next story is about how spitting on someone can turn into a best-selling concept album of sorts. Back in 1977, Pink Floyd was playing their very first stadium tour called the In the Flesh Tour, and to be honest, they were hating it. In fact, at one show in Montreal, Canada, Roger Waters thought that a group of fans had gotten so out of control that he spit on them. Adding to the band's woes was the fact that the band's financial management team had made a lot of risky investments that had failed, potentially leaving the band with a huge tax bill. And on top of all of that, the record label Columbia Records wanted a new album, and they wanted it sooner rather than later, as their last album, Animals, had been released in 1977. The band felt isolated. All those troubles, along with marital problems with different members of the band, and also the experience of their tour, left the band in a bad emotional and financial spot. During a little downtime while on tour, Roger Waters came up with 2 different concept ideas. One idea was about marriage, fidelity, and the like. That album eventually became the basis for Waters' future solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. The other concept was a 26-song opus about Waters, his childhood, and the isolation that had been built up. It was also about the band's former member, Syd Barrett, the uber genius whose life was troubled by mental health issues. That second concept was the one the band went with, although they changed the main characters from Waters and Barrett to a guy named Pink. The album was recorded from December 1978, almost right up to their November 1979 release date. It was recorded in London, England before they left the country, then recorded in Nice, Corinth, New York City, Hollywood, and Los Angeles, California. From the beginning, the album had problems. The guys weren't getting along, for starters. Their producer, Bob Ezrin, was constantly late and going through marital problems of his own. The album also had co-producer James Guthrie, which added some more tension because there were way too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, for this one. The band also had to move out of England in order to escape those taxes, and that led to even more family problems. Things got so bad that Roger Waters had to fire their keyboardist Rick Wright right in the middle of recording the album, although they kept him on as a salaried performer for the remainder of the album and the tour. That had to grind at his soul a lot. Meanwhile, Columbia tried to do two things to the band. The first was that they tried to get Waters to agree to a smaller cut of the publishing rights because it was a double album, so I guess doing more work for less money. Interesting concept. One record label executive offered to settle the dispute with a coin toss. Roger said he wouldn't even think about doing that. After all, why gamble on something that you own? The other thing that Columbia tried to do to them was to get the release date for the album pushed up. Waters again said no to that idea as well. Finally, the album was ready. Pink Floyd played it for the record label, who mainly hated it, but they decided to release it anyway because, well, they needed an album. That album, The Wall, was released on November 30th, 1979. At first, it got pretty mixed reviews. 3 songs were released as singles from it as well. Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, on November 23rd, 1979. Run Like Hell in April 1980. And Comfortably Numb on June 23rd, 1980. This album, that the record label and some critics hated, would go on to sell over 30 million records worldwide, become one of the biggest selling double albums of all time, and eventually be called one of the greatest albums ever recorded. It was number 1 on the Billboard Albums chart for 15 weeks. The album won James Guthrie a Grammy Award for Best Engineered Album and was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. It was then turned into a movie and was also performed in a star-studded tribute concert in front of what was left of the Berlin Wall once the country of Germany was reunified. The album that had the songs Another Brick in the Wall, Parts 1 and 2, Run Like Hell, Comfortably Numb, Mother, and Hey You. Pink Floyd's double album, The Wall. Released on November 30th, 1979. On November 28th, 1974, an event happened that would turn out to be historic, and it was all because of someone paying off a bet. In 1974, John Lennon was recording songs for his solo album, Walls and Bridges. While recording the album, John came up with a song that was inspired by a couple of things. The first inspiration was a song that was popular at the time called Rock Your Baby by George McCrae. The other inspiration was that while watching a preacher, who John found while he was channel surfing late one night on television, the preacher said the phrase, "Whatever gets you through the night." John decided to write a song using those ideas, but wanted a little help on the single. He got his good friend Elton John to record with him, and while Elton was recording the backup vocals and piano parts, he listened to the song over and over. Elton was convinced that the song was so good that it would go to number 1. John wasn't convinced at all, especially since he hadn't had a number 1 solo single ever since he left the Beatles. Elton made him a bet. If the song went to number 1, then John would have to perform at one of Elton's concerts. John took the bet, although we're not quite sure what the bet was if the song hadn't gone to number one. When the album was done, the record label picked Whatever Gets You Through the Night as the lead single, over John's objections, I might add. The song was released on September 23, 1974, and went to number one. It was surprisingly John's only number one solo hit while he was still alive. Now, about that bet. John lost, but he was true to his word. Elton was playing at Madison Square Garden in November. John lived in New York City, so it was a relatively quick trip down from the Dakota building where he lived on West 72nd Street down to Madison Square Garden on West 32nd Street. John rehearsed 3 songs with Elton's band on November 27th. On the evening of November 28, 1974, John Lennon paid off that bet. According to Elton, John was really nervous that night. He wasn't sure how the crowd would receive him. John eventually walked on stage and received a standing ovation. As the crowd died down to a level where they could be heard, John joined the band in playing Whatever Gets You Through the Night and 2 Beatles classics, I Saw Her Standing There and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which Elton had done a cover version of and made popular again. This appearance was also historic because it would be the last time that John Lennon would perform on a concert stage. There was talk of John doing a small concert tour to support his 1980 album, Double Fantasy, but that talk was cut short by the bullet that unfortunately ended John's life on December 8, 1980. Something else came from this concert as well, or rather, someone else. According to a recent interview between Elton John and John Lennon's son, Sean Lennon, John and his wife Yoko reunited at the concert. They had been separated for some time due to John's infidelity, among many other issues between the two of them. That night, according to Elton, John and Yoko realized how much they truly loved each other. After the concert, they went back to the apartment, and 9 months later, Sean Lennon was born. They conceived Sean the night of the concert. Sean told Elton that if it wasn't for his concert, he might not even be alive that day. The Elton John concert, which included the final concert appearance by John Lennon at Madison Square Garden in New York City on November 28, 1974. Before we continue, we'd like to tell you about the Music History Today podcast, where we go over the events that happened on that particular day in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops every single day, including weekends, on this podcast network. Now, back to the Music History In-Depth podcast. There's a lot of tragedy sometimes that goes with seeing any sort of music. There's events such as what happened at Le Bataclan Theatre in Paris, France, the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England, and at a country music festival in Las Vegas. There's the crisis that happened at a music theater in Moscow. There's the events at a Rolling Stones concert in Altamont. There's the station nightclub fire during a Great White concert in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and then there's what happened in 1979. General admission ticketing is something that I have never liked for many reasons. First, you have to get there really early to get a good seat. Second, unless you're standing in certain spots, you're not going to see much. The third thing is that it's really dangerous. Sure, it looks cool for your videos to have tons of fans running towards the front of the stage. However, those fans can get crushed, both from the initial run towards the stage for the front seats and also from the crush when people start pushing forward towards the stage from the back during the concert itself. Think Travis Scott and Astroland, just for instance. In 1979, The Who were on tour. They started on the East Coast, then went to the Midwest to play some gigs. On December 3rd, 1979, The Who played their 10th show of the tour in Cincinnati, Ohio at Riverfront Coliseum, which is now called the Heritage Bank Center. The show was sold out. There were 18,348 tickets sold. Of those, 14,770 were for general admission seating. You know the drill. Doors open, run to the front. The doors were supposed to open at 7 p.m. However, a radio station mistakenly promoted that general admission seating would start around 3 p.m., so people, of course, started showing up way before then. By the time doors were actually supposed to open at 7 p.m., there were already over 7,000 people outside the stadium waiting to get in. 7 p.m. came and went, and the doors were still closed. The crowd started to get impatient. And then, only 2 doors opened in the venue, which wasn't supposed to happen. It was supposed to be every door opening at the same time. What sent the crowd into overdrive was that The Who either did a late sound check or they were showing parts of the movie at the time, Quadrophenia, on the screen that they were showing for the concert. Either way, people outside could hear what was going on inside. Some people thought that the concert had started without them, and they were upset, and they wanted in now. They started moving towards the 2 doors that were open. 2 doors, 7,000 agitated people. Science tells you that that is a recipe for disaster. Always trust the science. The rush towards the 2 doors to see what they thought was the concert starting without them created a stampede. By the time the stampede was over, 11 people ranging from the ages of 15 to 27 were dead, and scores more were injured. The ramifications from the disaster were widespread. First, for the band. The Who weren't told about what happened until after the concert, which still went on as if nothing had happened. The victims' families sued everyone involved, including The Who. Most of them settled for around $150,000 each, which was about $385,000 in today's money. On December 3rd, 2015, a plaque was dedicated at the arena to the memory of the victims. The Who were supposed to play in Rhode Island a couple weeks after the Cincinnati concert. However, Providence, Rhode Island's mayor canceled the concert, even though the concert had assigned seating. In 2019, The Who announced that they would play in Cincinnati for their upcoming tour for the first time in 40 years. The concert was supposed to be held on April 23rd, 2020. However, the pandemic put that concert on hold until May 15th, 2022, 43 years after the horrific events of the last time that the group had played there. The band said that they needed to go back in order to heal, having never forgiven themselves for not staying in Cincinnati to mourn with their fans after what had happened. The concert has also been discussed in pop culture a lot. The most famous example is on the TV show WKRP in Cincinnati, who did a special episode on the event, seeing as how the show was about a rock music radio station in Cincinnati at the time of the disaster. Just about every band who plays the arena there pays tribute to the victims in one way or another as well. For a number of years, a lot of cities banned general admission seating at concerts. Those restrictions ended in those cities, though, as time went on. Of course, now general admission seating is the norm in a lot of places, especially at music festivals. When not properly done, though, it still leads to some bad things happening. For instance, what I mentioned earlier, the debacle that was the Travis Scott Astroland tragedy that happened only a few years ago when people rushed towards the stage, leading to the people in the front getting crushed. The stampede at the Who concert in Cincinnati, Ohio, that killed 11 people on December 3rd, 1979. Before we move on, there is one very important birthday to mention. The reason why he doesn't have his own segment is that he and his bands have been spoken about at least 5 times by my count on this podcast series. But for now, I will simply state the following, and feel free to come at me if you disagree, because you will be wrong. On November 27th, 1942 at 10:15 a.m. at King County Hospital in Seattle, Washington, the greatest guitarist who ever lived was born. His given name was Johnny Allen, then renamed to James Marshall before he changed his first name to Jimi. His last name was always the same. So, happy heavenly birthday to the iconic guitarist, the greatest guitarist to ever play the instrument, Mr. Jimi Hendrix, born November 27th, 1942. Our next story is about turning perceived lack of respect into great success. First, a little backstory. Back in 1980, Michael Jackson was pretty upset. Although his solo album, Off the Wall, had sold over 20 million copies worldwide and had also spawned the hits Off the Wall, Rock With You, and Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, the album did not get Record of the Year at the Grammys, nor Album of the Year. None of his stuff got anything. What's more, he had tried to get on magazine covers, but Rolling Stone famously declined to do a story on him. As he told someone afterwards, quote, "I've been told over and over that black people on the cover of magazines doesn't sell copies. Just wait. Someday those magazines are going to be begging me for an interview. Maybe I'll give them one. Maybe I won't." End quote. With that in mind, Michael went to work on his new album. He recruited Quincy Jones, who had produced Off the Wall, to produce his new album. They recorded 30 songs, agreeing to 9 of them for the album. He got songwriter Rod Temperton to help write a few songs, including Thriller, got horror film master Vincent Price to do the voice towards the end of the song, which he pulled off in 2 takes, I might add, recruited the members of the group Toto to play on songs like Beat It, had Eddie Van Halen do a guitar solo, and got Paul McCartney to duet on a song. And when all was said and done, both Michael and Quincy listened to the album and hated it. They then spent the next 2 months stripping down the songs and remixing them. Finally, on November 30th, 1982, Michael released the album Thriller. At first, it did okay. The Girl Is Mine with Paul McCartney was the lead single and went top 10. Then Michael made the music video for the next single, Billie Jean. MTV refused to play the video as they were, quote, a classic rock and roll station, end quote, which was their way of saying that we don't put black people on our channel. So thank you very much. Michael's record label president, Walter Yetnikoff, famously threatened to pull every single music video off of the channel unless they played Michael's video. And when that record label was CBS Records, the biggest record label in the world at that time, that threat carried an awful lot of weight. MTV relented and ended up playing Billie Jean. Good choice, as it helped to make both the song and MTV itself pretty popular. And then came Beat It, and then came the airing on NBC of Michael doing the moonwalk on the Motown TV special that they did. The day after that Motown 25 TV special, the album went into hyperdrive. The album started selling over 1 million copies per week. Michael received critical acclaim and awards, including that elusive Record of the Year and Album of the Year Grammy, and it's been certified to have sold over 34 million records in America alone and 70 million records worldwide, making it the second biggest selling album of all time in America after the Eagles' Greatest Hits album, and by far the biggest selling album of all time worldwide. It still to this day sells over 100,000 copies a week. Oh, about those magazines that wouldn't put him on the cover. Well, Rolling Stone came begging for him to do an interview with them, even though they had only given Thriller 4 out of 5 stars for their review. Michael thought about it and then granted them the interview, but only if they put him on the cover. They obliged. That cover became their biggest selling issue in a very long time. By late 1983, Michael Mania had taken a hold of the world. The Thriller album was selling upwards to 1 million copies a week. And what helped the album sales was the popularity of MTV. You could actually say that Michael and MTV had a pretty symbiotic relationship at that time. Michael made MTV into a cultural icon, while MTV did the same for Michael. In order to understand what happened with Michael Jackson in the 1980s, specifically the years 1983, 4, 5, 6, and 7, we'll say. Well, for the kids, let me try it this way. Take all the hype and mania behind Justin Bieber, let's say Taylor Swift, BTS, and any other overhyped thing of the past decade and a half. Then combine them all. And you're still not close to what happened with Michael Jackson, because at that time, remember, your attention span wasn't drifting off into 15 different directions with video games and all that. You had television, you had radio, you had cable TV if you didn't want to watch the regular channels. That's it. That's all you had. So everybody was bombarded from 50 Ways to Sunday with all things Michael Jackson, which ended up driving up all the hype, which in turn ended up just becoming a completely huge loop. That was the craziness of Michael Jackson at that time. The dude literally had thousands of screaming kids outside his hotel rooms. They shut down streets so the guy could actually move around. It was that crazy. Kind of like the Beatles way back in the 60s. That's about as close as you can get. Michael, by the way, definitely knew how to use both the hype and also the visual medium. The music videos for Billie Jean and Beat It had helped turn those songs into #1 smashes, and of course his performance on the Motown 25 TV special turned him literally into a megastar, and literally overnight, like day after that performance. Everybody wanted to know what Michael would do next. They didn't have to wait too long. In late 1983, Michael started working on a video for the title track to Thriller. Instead of making just a 5-minute music video, he decided to make a short film with a horror bent to it in keeping with the song's theme. He gathered up the best in the business at that time. He got John Landis, who had directed the movie An American Werewolf in London, to direct his little video here. He got Michael Peters, who was the hot choreographer at the time after working with Michael on Beat It and also working with Pat Benatar on Love is a Battlefield. So he got Michael to choreograph this one. Academy Award-winning makeup artist Rick Baker did the special effects, while horror film superstar Vincent Price's voice made the film, having already been on the original recording of the song. Michael's now famous red jacket, by the way, was designed by John Landis's wife, Deborah Landis. The video was not without controversy, of course, as Michael was a devout Jehovah's Witness at that time. For starters, he had cast Playboy model Ola Ray for the female lead. That, of course, did not sit well with the church. The other thing that didn't sit well with the church was the subject matter of the video, which, of course, was Michael turning into a werewolf. You think things are bad now, kids? This was back in 1983. Reagan conservatism was a thing back in the day. You had the moral majority. It was pretty conservative, we'll just say, as much as that gets overlooked when everybody does their 80s retrospectives. This controversy, by the way, got to the point where if you actually go to YouTube right now and pull up the full video, at the beginning, you will see the following words. Quote, "Due to my strong personal convictions, I wish to stress that this film in no way endorses a belief in the occult." End quote. Literally, That's what had to be put in front of the video because people couldn't figure out that werewolves don't. You know what? Let me just continue on because things got stupid. In order to get the film eligible for an Academy Award, they premiered it not on MTV, but in a movie theater. On November 14th, 1983, the movie premiere for the video was held at the Metro Crest Theater in Los Angeles. A lot of famous people, of course, were there, including Eddie Murphy and Diana Ross. The film received a standing ovation and was shown again, much to the delight of the audience. On December 2nd, 1983, millions of kids like myself rushed home from school to watch the video premiere on MTV and were transfixed. MTV ran the video, which clocked in at 13 minutes 42 seconds every hour on the hour. This was back in the day when they would do what they called world premiere videos. If memory serves, the first time it aired was sometime between noon to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I caught it every hour after I got home around 4 p.m. The ramifications of this video were pretty rampant. For starters, the film did not receive that elusive Academy Award nomination in the short film category as Michael had hoped for. However, it did become the most overplayed song during the Halloween season. Yay. In fact, because of that, the song now shows up on the Top 100 Singles chart during the Halloween season, much like Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You shows up on the Christmas time charts. The behind-the-scenes VHS documentary on the making of Thriller, literally called The Making of Thriller, sold over 9 million copies, becoming the most successful music video according to the Guinness Book of World Records. On YouTube, the full version of the video has, as of this podcast, over 1 billion views, with a 3-minute 22-second short version of the video getting over 295 million views. It is also the first music video to be inducted into the National Film Registry by the United States Library of Congress. In short, the video itself was a game changer, not just for 80s culture, but for the music video genre from that moment forward. Michael Jackson's album Thriller, the biggest selling album of all time worldwide, released on November 30th, 1982. The premiere of Michael Jackson's Thriller music video on MTV on December 2nd, 1983. And that is it for the Music History In-Depth podcast for November 27th through December 3rd. Thank you very, very much for listening and or watching if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify.